There you go. So again, hi again for joining us. My name is Felipe Martinez and I use he pronouns and I'm the director for Circle. Thank you for joining us today for a conversation with Crysti Chen. This program is part of our Global Leadership Series, which is an opportunity to provide a space for UW, University of Washington alumni and current students to engage in a conversation about the alumni's particular field, and then students that might be having questions about that. So to kind of like create an opportunity for students to engage and alumni to engage with each other and share information. So one of the things, uh, um, so the way we have this set up, it's, oh, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Eli. So Eli, you could introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, really quick. Hi everyone. My name is Eli Heller. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a career coach at the Career and Internship Center, normally in Mary Gates Hall, but today in my bedroom. So welcome. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you all.
Thank you, Eli. So like I mentioned before, this is an opportunity for alumni and students to engage with each other. So Eli and I are going to be the moderators for the discussion. We only have 5 questions to ask of Crysti, and that's just to get the conversation started. But the main point of the program is for you, for the students to be able to ask questions. So after we're done with those questions, we'll turn it over to you, and then we encourage you to ask questions. Once we're done with our conversation, one of the things that we have found that is successful with events like this is to have an opportunity to use breakout rooms, so that way we have a smaller conversation about the things that have been discussed. So we'll plan to do that after with the Q&A to again be able to take a deeper dive into the conversation topic. After the discussion, after the breakout rooms, we'll come back together and just wrap up and close the event. One of the things, in the other circumstances, this event will be in person. We'll probably be at the hub or another one of the rooms on campus, where it's easier to engage with each other, right? When we have an opportunity to raise our hand and be able to ask questions that way. In this world, the way we do it is to use that raise your hand feature on Zoom. And then at that point, you'll be able to ask your questions. If you have a question, either Eli or myself will turn it over to you, and then for you to ask your question. When you, as you prepare to speak, what we ask, if possible, is that you turn on your camera. And then before you ask your question, if you could introduce yourself, your major or program at the University of Washington, and for you to share your pronouns so we could address you correctly. The other way to engage also is to do it via the chat. And that will be a way to ask your question again as well. And either Eli or I will ask that question, but also the chat is a way to engage in the conversation. So if there's things, for example, that Crysti is mentioning that resonate with you, it's perfectly okay to react to that via the chat. It's a way for us to engage with each other and kind of another way to keep the conversation going. The other thing that we could do is use the reaction buttons. So that way, similar to reacting to the chat, reacting to what Crysti is saying via the chat, you could also use the buttons as a way to be able to engage. Okay. So lastly, before we start, thank you, George. So lastly, before we start, we have a small group, but if it's still good to know who's in the room, so that we will be able to see essentially who's joining us for the conversation. So I'm just going to do a quick poll that is going to ask you for your affiliation at the University of Washington. So everyone, if I could ask you to complete the poll based on your affiliation, so that way we know who's joining us today. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So see, we have 4 undergraduate students, 2 faculty or staff, and 2 alums of the University of Washington. So thank you. So with that said, let me close this and I'll turn it over to Eli so he could introduce Crysti.
Okay, hi everyone. So thank you again for being here. And again, my name is Eli, career coach at the Career Center. And I'm going to be reading you a little bit of information about our speaker tonight, Crysti Chen. So Crysti Chen is currently a Schwartzman Scholar at Tsinghua University. She graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a Master of Science in Education in Educational Entrepreneurship from the University of Washington, and from the University of Washington with a BA in Political Economy and an International Studies minor. Her academic footprint includes semesters at UIBE Beijing, UCL London, and NUS Singapore. Crysti founded her first international nonprofit organization, World Youth Value Society, at the age of 16 and committed to improving rural gender equality and education access for a decade. She then brought her passion for philanthropy to her current job as the co-founder and general partner of impact investment VC fund Uniwill Ventures. Crysti received accolades as a Mary Gates Leadership Scholar, Los Angeles Post Top 30 Entrepreneurs, APEC Voices of the Future, Stevie's Gold Award in Innovative Management, etc. Crysti has a vision in leveraging technological advancement to benefit the less fortunate populations, therefore creating a friendlier and more inclusive economy. Her actions include funding and supporting agricultural tech, health tech, and clean tech startup companies in both the US and China. Please welcome Crysti Chen.
Thank you so much, Eli. Thank you. So,
thank you, Crysti. So
Thank you, Crysti.
the first question, right? Which is, so I know Eli already talked about your bio, but I was wondering if your own words, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in social entrepreneurship.
yes. So thanks, Eli, for giving my introduction, but I would provide a little bit more background. So I am a Chinese international student that came to UW. Earlier than that, I actually came to Washington State for high school. So I was in 2009, I came here as an exchange student, and I was assigned to a high school in Tacoma called Lincoln High. And then I went there, studied for a year, and that year, Yunnan, my home province, which is a very less developed province in China, broadly speaking, that province went through the worst drought in the history. So I knew that a lot of farmland were laid off, and a lot of farmers, they lose their entire annual income. So consequently, a lot of children from those families they dropped off from school. First of all, they need to help with the farm work, and secondly, they cannot afford. So from all that circumstances, I read from news and heard from my parents talking, and my parents are government officials, so they are talking in a governmental perspective. So I knew the situation. So I started a fundraising campaign in the high school that I went to exchange, Lincoln High School. We raised $1 from each student. So we raised around 1,000 something from my school. But because I knew more students, they were doing exchange program in different schools. So some of them were in private schools in different states. So we did this together. So collectively, we raised more than 200,000 that year, only $1 from each student. So, so we actually did it in a very large scale, and we wanted to make it an impact, not just simply giving this to Red Cross or any international organization. We decided to do a summer summit. So we gathered together 50 students from United States, both Chinese or American or even foreign students. We went to Yunnan that summer. So I wanted to bring them to see how bad that situation was, or even to just make friends with local students, so they can know, they can broaden their view of the world, or even have outside external connections to motivate themselves. So we did that summit in 2010 in the summer. And after that, I came back, started this nonprofit organization called World Youth Value Society, because I saw that we young people had that power if we wanted to do something together. So we can not just only raise a fund, we can also deploy that fund. And we decided to do voluntary teaching. It's very similar to Teach for America or Teach for China, the program, or Beautiful China. There's a program in UW, so people do voluntary teaching. We also started like small projects, periodical projects. We help prevent malnutrition. We raise funds to provide nutritional packages to younger kids. We brought a group of students who studied design to make changes, to make improvement on their interior, the household interior design, to make sure that their smoke from cooking went out, didn't stay inside of the room, to prevent indoor pollution. And also we bridge income resources to local women so that they can have a stable income, and at the same time they can have a word to say in terms of deciding whether to send their girls to school or to pay for that. So those are like periodical programs that we started during the past 10 years. And there are more because I stepped down from the president position after 2 years. So I wasn't very involved at the later years, but I was initially. And the reason why I am so passionate about this, because I came from that place. So there are so many places in the world that is still very underserved and very it's very underprivileged group of people, and I saw it, I experienced it. Although I am very fortunate to grow from a family that is definitely better off, but I knew friends who were in that situation. And according to my experience, that we can we definitely can make an impact even as a high school student, and then became a college student. Then even I do what I do for work, it's impact investing. I do a bigger impact today than I was as a high school student. But all I wanted to prove is that that it doesn't matter how big that impact is, that people can start doing things from small to big. So but as a young adult, especially after went to like a private graduate school and paid so much tuition for that, I decided I didn't want to stay in nonprofit and make relative comparatively less money as my income. I decided to do something that can combine my financial stability or independence with my passion, which is to make an impact. So in 2017, I learned there's a term called impact investing. I didn't know about this before. So that is you're doing impact, you're doing investing, which is relatively more a job or an industry. You can have more salary or composition, but also that you're doing it with mission-driven entrepreneurs. So it's doing you're funding social entrepreneurs. So I decided to do that, but instead of finding a job, I fund a co-founder, a general partner together, that we raised 40 million US dollars in 2017 and start this impact investing fund called Uniwell Ventures. So actually today we won a award called Hurun 30 under 30, which is the Chinese equivalent of the Forbes 30 under 30 for this fund. So I'm so excited. So this is another example that this can be successful if we wanted to do it. We wanted to combine impact with financial independence. So now our portfolio companies, we have 31 portfolio companies. That means companies that we invested. 85% of them are social entrepreneurs. They're either helping with social injustice issues or like environmental issues, along with that their primary focus of making money and being sustainable. So I think, and now what I do is I'm trying to fund technological startups who has scalability to make an impact. Yes. And that's for question one.
Thanks, Crysti. And just out of curiosity, would you mind sharing the name of your hometown, or?
Yunnan province. So Yunnan province is among the least developed provinces in China. And my city is actually the capital city, like Olympia to Washington State. So my city is more developed. But other than that are most rural. And they are like 141 extreme poverty area. So there are all, so people, majority of people of those 141 counties were lived below the I think the word extreme poverty, the line. So it's a very less developed place.
Got it. Well, thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah, it's a tourism place. It's very full of natural resources and biodiversity. I think it's one of the top destinations for tourism, especially you wanted to save the natural resources, but like financially or economically, it's not that good.
Got it.
Yes.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And our next question for you is, there are some students in the room who hope to become entrepreneurs, just like you. When thinking about your time as an undergraduate at the University of Washington, were there any courses or experiences or people that stood out in helping you get to where you are today?
Yes.
So just a little bit more about your UW experience.
Yes, I have a lot to share actually. This brought me back to my beautiful 4 years in UW. I really hope that I could go back in time. So I studied political economy major and international studies. I wish that I knew there was a minor or probably a major in entrepreneurship in Foster School. But at the time, Foster was very hard to get in. And also I didn't knew about this. So I didn't. But at the first year, at my senior year, I knew my friend got in that minor, which I hope that is something I regret not doing that. So for what I did, I studied economy because that is part of the requirement for political economy. And there are two required courses, macro and micro economies, which at the time I thought it's not very useful to study because it's too fundamental. And I feel like I'm not going to become a economist. But turned out in real life, I think those are essential. So when people are talking about things, doesn't matter what industry or what technological startup that I'm talking to, I think the financial thing is, or the economic model or basic knowledge or series is a common ground. So I think I highly recommend that to people who are interested in doing something like business related. And second is that I also heard there's a master's degree in entrepreneurship, and I actually got admitted, although I didn't go, but I read through all the course schedules and syllabus. I think they are like financial reporting classes that they teach you how to do Excel and how to do those financials. It's totally essential, and it's very useful in real life. Doesn't matter if you need to only to analyze or to rate that, or in the other situation that you need to make those financial report modules. I think it's super important. And another thing is I recommend to attend to information sessions on like the trendy technological like issues or technological development. I know that there are like information sessions and even classes for that. And the third thing I want to mention is that if you go to entrepreneurship or innovation related classes, a side thing that you can do is to find co-founders, which is really hard to find after you graduate. There's, especially under COVID, I used to go to a lot of like entrepreneurial community gatherings or like meetup events or some event in co-working spaces before COVID. But nowadays, I think it's just super hard. It's hard for existing startups, but it's even harder for people who are trying to find co-founders or people to start up an idea or to start up a company. And another section I want to mention is my study abroad experiences. So I take an advantage of that for my 4 years. I did 4 study abroad for the entire 4 years, so which make my undergrad very unique. And my parents also brag about this to their parents' friends. So they said their students, their children should do something like my experience, which is very beneficial. So the first year I did a summer school in UIBE, which stands for University of International Business and Economics. It's in Beijing because I never had higher ed experiences in my home country. So I decided to go back for that. So that was the first time I studied in Chinese context for higher ed. And that is a general experience. So I can choose any classes and that can be transferred back to UW as context graduation credits. And for my second year, my sophomore year, I took the SIT study abroad program. It's through UW, and I did multilateral diplomacy program in Switzerland, which is a totally eye-opening experience. It's my first time in Europe, and because of the Schengen visa, I explored to more than 10 countries during that short, I think 2 months program. The third year, it's also through UW. I went to University College London in UK through a direct exchange program called the Economic Department Direct Exchange. So that was my first time in UK. Learned the British accent, and also learned how like British people were teaching, and their current issues, their economic like topics are totally different than what we talk about this in United States, which is another very cool experience. Lastly, in my senior year, I did another direct exchange in National University in Singapore in politics department, which I also wanted to learn the Asian perspective of what they view politics. Is definitely different than the Western view. And also it's the politics department from NUS is well known in Asia. So I think it's a very good opportunity. So what I gained from all those experiences, first, I have a very wide, broad international alumni network. So I always get invited to different like alumni gatherings in different cities, in different occasions. And from that, I meet a lot of new people after I graduate. And another thing is, I think, friendship. So I went to all those exchange where like study abroad programs with UW students, or even like students from like other schools. And because we step into a new culture together, so we are very accountable to each other. And then we fostered very good friendship. Because I remember the first year when I came to UW, they said it's a huge campus, and if you don't see someone, then you probably never see him again. So from going study abroad somewhere else, we become like an organized small cluster of friends that we stay together. And then we become like lifelong friendship. We establish that lifelong friendship. And another thing is I immerse myself into different cultures. Although I already studied abroad when I came to UW as international student, but I also went to different places. And that's what was my father called, it's an international studying experiences instead of American studying experiences. So which I find it's also beneficial to like even American scholars or foreign international students, just like I was. And also for entrepreneur perspective, you have to be in different market or culture to figure out what is a problem, what is a real problem. It's not your hypothetical problem, and what is actually needed. So from attending to different places that I knew, probably like rideshare is so popular here, but not in Singapore at that time. So I can figure out what is needed, what is not, what I thought, I imagined that is needed. And the last section I'm going to talk about is the programs. I knew, although I am not part of that, it's a 11 entrepreneurship program. I heard it's very competitive, but for future entrepreneurs, I think it's a very good opportunity. Also, I think that it's going to be a cluster of a community of students that you have very similar, not probably background, but a mission or interest, passion. So you can do something together in the future. And there's another thing called a Dempsey Startup Competition. And that, I think it's more practical. It's just like the demo days were road shows that I used to attend when I started to work full time. But I think because how competitive it is, that gives you the real life experiences as a entrepreneur, or at least what you need to prepare to form a team, to prepare a pitch, to prepare a business plan, and to present. So I think those are all the very key things that you can prepare, where you can get ready before you step into your full-time entrepreneur experience. And another thing is Arthur Berg Center for Entrepreneurship. Although I didn't know much about that, but Arthur, he was later, so earlier this year, he was introduced by a friend to me as my mentor. So I think that's another thing that worth exploring. And from Arthur, and he introduced me to Dempsey, which are like legendary people. They were names to me when I was students, but now I'm not friends with them, but I know them, like I talk to them in person, which is super cool. So I think if I had any relation question when I was a undergrad student. I could have more to speak to them, but now I just learned. So that's another thing. And also there's a career center. I think definitely if you look to participate as interns to like tech companies or even startups, or to talk about like opportunities that you can get more practical real life experiences as a student, I think definitely go to career center, and they have more like professional knowledge or experiences to consult you, to guide you through like what your passion is, or how do you achieve, how can you plan your way to achieve to your destination. And then I wanted to talk about Schwarzman Scholars. So this is an opportunity I am recently awarded. It's definitely competitive, but it's a fully funded program. It's a program funded by Stefan Schwarzman, which is a co-founder of Blackstone Group. It's one of the largest private equity fund. So I think he personally donated 100 million, and collectively with other people, they donated 300 million US dollars to Tsinghua University, which is the top university in China and also a partner school of UW, of the GIX campus. So Tsinghua, it's going to be take place in Tsinghua University, fully funded, all those transportation, accommodation, health insurance, and it's taught by the world leading faculties from like Ivy League schools, like Harvard, Stanford, and all those schools, and also top Chinese teaching faculties from Beijing, Peking University, Tsinghua University, and so on. So it's definitely worth considering if you are into like international relations, interested to learn more about China, especially US China. So the composition for the student for each cohort is 20% Chinese students, 20% foreign students, and 40% American students. So if you are American, you have a better chance to get into this program. And there's another program that I heard because a lot of Schwarzman scholars, they were part of that. It's called Gates Cambridge Scholars. So it's also another fully funded program to study at Cambridge University for any major. So you have to apply to the major first and then apply to this scholarship. And I think that direct us to another office to talk to is the Office of Merit Scholarship. When I was in school, I was also awarded as Mary Gates Scholar, Leadership Scholars. So I think there are definitely more opportunities for native, for like Americans, because as an international student, there are limited opportunities. But I think that's definitely something worth looking for, because not just that money that you receive, that definitely relieves, that is definitely give a helpful hand, but also that connection. I still receive a lot of emails from Mary Gates Scholars community, like an email thread, so I can get updates and keep updated with what's going on campus or for that community of people, which I am super happy to stay in touch with them. Yes, I'm done. Sorry, I talked too much, but I really wanted to share.
No, this is great. I know Eli appreciates the shout out to the Career Center. And then, also at the same time, the office, you mentioned so much as a higher education professional that makes me extremely happy. You mentioned as a way to discover the passion, university resources, student organizations, classes, professional organizations. So there's a wealth of information out there in order to help students find the passion. So thank you. That was amazing. And good thing we're recording this. So that way, the students will be able to get all of the resources that you mentioned. But one of the things that you addressed in your question right before, you talked a little bit about mentorship, right? So as administrators, one of the things that we remind students is that this journey doesn't necessarily, you don't have to travel it alone. There's a lot of people that you could turn to, whether it be inside the university or outside the university, that could help guide the way. So we're wondering if you have had any experience with mentors and how did you create those relationships?
Yes. So this also, I spent some time to recall the relationship that I have with my mentor, and who were super helpful in my, not just professional, but also in directing some of my personal decisions. They are definitely role models to me, and I want to not just introduce these relations, and also how I met them or how I built these connections. Hopefully this is helpful to my fellow Huskies. So the first one I want to mention, so he recently just passed away, but he has been a very valuable resource to me. His name is Sidney Rittenberg. He was an American journalist. I met him when I attended to high school in Tacoma. At that year, he published his new book in 2009. So I went to that book signing event. So that's how I met with him. So because I told him that I'm Chinese scholars, I came to United States all by myself. I wanted to learn more. So initially, I just asked his email. He gave me his name, a business card, very formally. So what I did was that I follow up with him. So for the 2 years when I was a high school student, I sent him emails to update or to even ask questions because he's professional in like U.S.-China relation, which I was super passionate about. So I asked questions. He sometimes get back to me, sometimes not. But I didn't just keep hassling him, but I sent emails after like sought for consideration. This is a question that I should ask. So I wrote an email to him. And that's how initially that I established this connection. And then I came to I came to the University of Washington. I entered the international relation major that opened the door for a lot more in-depth discussion. So I visit him afterwards because I knew him at that time. I knew him after 3 years. So we had email discussions, and then I decided he invited me to visit his house in special occasions. So I visit him, listen to his story in person. And always stay curious and ask related questions, academic questions, and also even personal questions. And how we got close with each other is that I found a way that I could be helpful to him. So although in this kind of relationship, we are the persons that we always ask for help, or we always wanted to be helped. But later on, when he was talking about his story or his experience in China to me, he mentioned that he really wanted to find a person, which accidentally that person was in my province. So I said that my family could help. So there are multiple ways that you could be helpful, but this is how I find I could be helpful to him. So I asked my father for help. So I tried to help find that person for him, but also at that time that person passed away. But at least I gave a confirmation to him, and that's how I also provided some value to this relationship, and that's how we become closer. He then introduced me to his family, his daughter and son. They are like 30s at that time, now probably 40s. They're like considered like uncles, auntie to me. And then that's how we become like mentor and mentee relations afterwards. And when my father came to my graduation in 2015, he also decided to invite us to his house all together, and that was my father, and say thanks to my father in person. That's how we got this relationship going. The second mentor I had, her name is Dean, and she's a philanthropist from San Francisco. So she used to work for Rockefeller Foundation, and she's also very well off. So she decided to become a philanthropist after she retired. We met at a conference, and at that conference I also did a presentation. So she is pretty impressed by what I did I think it's about 5 years ago. And I decided to exchange. So I asked her for her contact information. I got her email. I added her LinkedIn, and I kept her updated with my progress in my charitable work. So that this is very relevant, and I asked for her advices. I think the key point I want to tell is that at conferences or event that you go, just try to sell yourself at a proper present yourself your best self at a proper timing and in a proper way. And also I learned a habit that is to send follow-up emails and even thank you note. So this I also learned from Stefan Schwarzman, the founder of my current program. He said that he sent thank you note as a business tycoon. He said he sent thank you note to every person he met in a week. So which I think if he does that, I should do that too. But I started doing that 5 years ago. So that's how I didn't do as frequently as he did, but I think it's definitely a good habit that you can continue some conversation and also establish some follow-up relations, especially with people who are more experienced than you, and also you guys are in the same industry or have the same passion. So for Dean, that we are both very passionate in philanthropy, so I learned a lot of things from her. And also occasionally she shared a lot of information in related like events or conferences. She even sent like free code for me to attend to some certain events that she's involved. So I think that's another way. It's to just send a right card or even electronically emails to say thank you or to follow up with a conversation. And the third one is Burke. So I just mentioned RT Burke. I only met him once in person. That was after pandemic. He was courageous to come out to meet me in person. And I think this kind of people, so he was actually introduced to me by a mutual friend. And that mutual friend thought that I am a good candidate to talk to RT. So I didn't know him. I only knew his name when I was in school, Burke program, entrepreneurship program. So that mutual friend, he decided to introduce us to meet with each other. But for people like Arthur Burke, they were generous enough to spare a lot of time with younger fellows, especially Huskies. So I think there's definitely ways that you can try to approach to him if you're super interested in entrepreneurship. So he had backgrounds in investment as well. So if you're into those kind of industries, definitely try to reach out to him. And he shared a lot of information, give me a few books to read. And because he's so experienced as a mentor, he asked me to read certain books and to get back to him so we can follow on to keep up with contacting each other and follow up on our topics, on our conversations. So I think from this, I think I wanted to refer to a book I recently read called Lean In. It's by the CFO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg. She said that she's always being promoted or being sponsored by mentors throughout her professional life, and she's one of the most influential female leaders in the world. And she said, what she has been doing is that she always keep up with all her previous mentors, so that she spent time and effort to manage that relationship as she grows. So I think that's something I learned personally, and also to ask references. So if you know person that you want to meet, just ask. Especially I think in Seattle, I barely encounter rejections. People are also oftentimes trying to be as helpful as possible. So the last thing I learned as a 26-year-old young adult is that the longer that you know a person, that relationship become more precious and trustworthy. So for me, is to spend more time to maintain relationship. So to say a person you know just now compared with a person you know for 10 years, I think you can definitely get more from the longer relationship. So to always, whatever you started a relationship, try to maintain it if you think you can learn from that person where this relationship is valuable. Yes, that's all I have to share for this question.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Crysti. And you touched on some really, really important things that I just want to reiterate really briefly. You talked a lot about being proactive and taking initiative and introducing yourself to people and following up with them. And that is just my recommendation for pretty much any student. I just think that, you have to be proactive. You have to reach out to people. You have to make the connections. Don't get discouraged if you don't hear back right away. Because really that's the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing anyone can do is not respond to you right away, right? So it doesn't mean they won't. But yeah, I think that a lot of what you just shared about networking, about being proactive and taking initiative, about establishing connections and maintaining the connections over time, and really showed that the connections that you made with your mentors were mutually beneficial, especially as time went on. So thank you so much for sharing that. Those are really important insights, I think, for everyone to hear. So on that note, our next question is, you have experience establishing your entrepreneurship projects abroad, and you kind of already talked a little bit about this, but can you tell us a little bit about a particular project that you helped establish and how you set it up?
Yes. So I want to talk about my first for-profit experience. So I started my first startup. It's a organic food importing company. It's a specialty food importing company called Hojin. So I started this because I had this resource back in China, which a friend I grew up with, her family company does this kind of business, and they're really looking to expand to overseas, not just in the United States, but because at that time my friend and I, we studied in United States, so we decided to do that in between US and China. So the first thing I want to share is that oftentimes people say that you find the market opportunity or a life problem you want to solve, and then you dive into that. But in real life, I find it's sometimes backward, the reverse way. It's actually whatever resources that you can use or leverage, and then you dig into that, and then you find a opportunity you can build up on. So for that, when we actually encountered a lot of barrier initially. That company, although they were one of the biggest company, specialty organic food company in China, but they had no way to know like what is the FDA regulation, what is the importing exporting issues. So just from my friend and I, so starting from two of us, we read all those law how to import stuff, especially perishable food stuff to United States. We talked to the Washington Department of Commerce how to get some like egg or like meat product to be approved, cleared by FDA. And then we also reach out to local Asian food markets, and we targeted on those Chen stores. So we didn't have to go out of state. We can only talk to one of their franchise in state, and then we can sell in multiple locations. So we did all that, but it turned out because this was not a startup created from a problem that we saw. So we didn't say that American market needed that specialty for food from China because we had the resources. So we decided to start from there. So it turned out to be not a very big project. So we stopped after 2 years, and this friend's company, his parents' company, acquired this small startup because we sorted out how to get their product to United States. So they want to use all those logistic channels, but we didn't expand it too much because first of all, we don't have much experiences leading or even hiring, firing, and doing that with people with human resource management. That we are not even college grads. We were both sophomore students at the time, and also we weren't. Both my co-founder and I weren't aggressive enough because at the time we thought we always have a backup plan that we were full-time students, so we don't have to put full effort, which is not a characteristic for entrepreneur. At later stage, I realized it's not a right thing to do. If you really wanted to do it like full time all in, then you should do it like all in. So at that time, we wasn't we weren't aggressive enough. And certainly that is a very traditional business. It's trade. So you can easily calculate the margin, which you just do it by like how much stuff that you can export or import and sell, which made it not a so exciting business compared to like Instagram or like Snapchat or all those like technological based ideas, which seems to be more scalable or has more like unlimited potential. So that's a third reason that we decided to give it up. But I also had many takeaways from this failure, or not a complete failure, but a not so successful experience. First of all, I think it's super important to find reliable partnership, especially if you wanted to do this in a foreign country. That then you really need to have a local partnership that you can trust fully, like 100%. This is, I think, it's as important as or as hard as to find your partner for marriage, because you have to trust them like 100% financially and also in terms of making business decisions. And second, is if you want to do something abroad, you have to be there. So you have to try to live the locals way and don't assume that there's a problem according to your experience living here in the United States. So you need to really to be there to try to find out the opportunity to see the problem, to experience it, and find a solution tailor-made for that costume or for that market that you're trying to tackle. Third is talk to as many local people as possible to verify your idea, because um, at most that you are also a foreigner, where you are someone like an outcomer. So you really need a local guidance, trustworthy advices, and also go back to the first point, the partnerships that you can fully trust. And fourth, if you wanted to do something like cross-border like we did, it would involve a lot of legal issues, both in terms of the country that you are working with and also in terms of like getting in and out to America. Doesn't matter if it's like a physical product like what we did, or like a consulting business that you have to figure out your tax issue, your legal status, your immigration status, and all those. And lastly is to find a value proposition for yourself. Why would you and your partner to be the right person to do it? Because why wouldn't the local people why wouldn't the local people to become a better candidate? So you really have to bring something to the table to try to solve a foreign problem, or try to like to enter to a foreign market. And that's what I learned, or what I didn't do well for my first adventure, to work with a foreign business or a cross-border business.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Crysti.
you.
Uh, I'm going to go straight to our last question because I'm looking at the time.
Yes.
But one of the things, so the theme for the Global Leadership Series this quarter is Women in Leadership. So we're hoping to highlight, prominent alumni like yourself. And then we're just wondering for the last question, there's some students here in the room that could potentially want to aspire to be you, or be as accomplished as you are. Any words of advice for students?
No. Okay. So no, I'm not like anywhere near successful. I am just trying to, trying to be there. So according to my observation, which is very common phenomenon, is that from the entry level, you can probably see a 50-50 gender equality in professional working spaces. But as women then encountered with their life stages, as to have pregnancy or started to parenting, from the leadership, especially senior leadership levels, you see less female than males. So that is the first point that I want to introduce, which is when I was in a meeting with senior leaders, I found myself very unique in a table. So because I am among one of the few females sitting on the table, which I think it's very made so us females to have advantage to be memorized, because you're the only people, only few females presenting there. So from there, I think is I try to make my voice heard, even if it's just to raise my hand to ask questions. So don't be afraid of doing that, both males and females. As young people, you're also rare to be seen in a table like that. So just to raise up your voice or your hands to make people see you, hear your comments, and to have something to talk to you afterwards, or even you can follow up on your what was your point of view, and then you can talk to people on that. And secondly, because I am a female, so I find myself a naturally affiliated, a natural affiliation to female leaders. So I will look for commonalities if I'm meeting with high-profile people, female leaders. I would definitely do my research before the meeting and try to find the commonality, tell my story that they can sympathize, or they can recognize in their previous experiences, and also ask for guidance. Never shy to ask for guidance for both boys and girls. But I think that's what I did. And the third one is, I think it's also for both sex, is that to keep in mind the minority issue. So minority can be gender, can be ethnicity, or it can be your point of view. So if you keep yourself aware of like helping minorities' voice to be heard, sometimes you are naturally being helped as well. So sometimes I feel like people just helping me to get my voice where my identity appeared. So just keep this minority or ethnicity issue you in mind and help people when you can. And in return, sometimes you will just be helped by people who have like-minded situation. And my last words is to both as female or even as male to be as ambitious, as fearless, and as competitive to the counterparts. And as a future female leaders, I think you definitely have some certain characteristics that are not seen as common in males. For example, to be very caring and to be very sympathetic and something like that. So just try to use that because that's what make us unique or make us different from male leaders in the future. So I think just to use our strengths and to be caring, to be mindful of others, mindful of minority issues, and try to ask for things that you want.
Awesome. Thank you, Crysti. So your words are very inspiring, and I'm excited now to turn it over to open questions for the group. And it looks like we actually already have a question from Siri. So I'm going to go ahead and read that one out loud. So Siri says, "Hi, Crysti, thank you for providing deep insight and sharing your experiences with us. I want to know, as an international student, what barriers, if any, did you need to overcome to get to where you are now? And what did you learn by overcoming these challenges?"
Yes. So first is language. So when I have been studying English from third grade from elementary school, but when I first came here, I become like speechless. I'm too coward to speak out, but now I can like speak publicly. But at that time, I was also culturally, I was so afraid to raise up my hand in a large lecture hall a class. So I think that's the first thing that you really have to challenge yourself. I know that I might still have an accent. I might still don't get some things like culturally, but I would ask and I would speak out today. But I wish I could do this like earlier, especially in my like first freshman year. I think I was silent in my first 2 years in Europe. A lot of people could not probably think of me in their class because I just don't speak. I think and I do my homework, but I didn't share. So I think that is the first obstacle for international students, especially as like English as second language speakers. And secondly, I think it's our immigration status, our legal issue that prevent you from doing probably even out of school work or even to participate in startup and doing all those. So I think definitely go to international student office because there's CPT and OPT option that you can fully take advantage of as a student. Then they can at least allow you to work like on campus. I still remember that I did a semester in the McCarthy's cafeteria as my first work experience in the United States and got my social security number from that work. So definitely ask for that. And thirdly, I think is that we might not everyone, but when I was young, I missed a lot of like career sessions or information session because I thought it's irrelevant to me. A lot of times I heard that it's only open to like green card holders or person who can work without sponsorship or something like that. Then I just decided not to go. And also it applies to scholarships. So I think if you have a chance, definitely go there. And I knew that a lot of opportunities, it's only there if you ask. So definitely go to all those sessions and try to explore internship opportunities or career opportunities. Go to all those sessions, and at least you can meet with a couple new friends and to have some new relationship going on from all those information sessions.
That's awesome. Thank you, Crysti. See, it's another opportunity, more resources to share with students. So it looks like Shubhangi has a question. So Shubhangi, would you mind unmuting yourself and introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, Crysti, first of all, I so relate to your talking thing. I talk a lot and I sometimes think, like I'm in a similar situation, but I just want to share so many things. So thank you so much for like, talking so much and like just sharing us, very detailed information. I was wondering something, you mentioned that you studied abroad in like all 4 years in college at UW. and you went to like different countries. So how do you think, you're like, I feel like as an international student, like, now coming to the US, there's like a clash of identities that I always like face,
Yes.
and you being in different countries, like how is that for you? How did you like, like now, how do you identify yourself? Like, do you identify yourself with one culture, or how does that look like for you?
Yes, I feel like the most that I took away from that for study abroad experiences, and now I even have more like travel experiences after I started working. I feel like for everywhere I've been, and also especially those four places I stayed for more than 3 months and studied there and made friends and lived there for a while, that I understand their perspectives. So when people, if today they tell me that they come from Singapore, and I know that common ground, it's like when American people talking about election, I know that they're talking about Biden and Trump. So if they talk about like I come from Singapore because I live there, even though I am not very updated with their current like political or economic issues, but I can easily catch up. So this gives me a way that I can be easily, people can be easily understandable to me. And I think it's super important, even that if you just stayed in the United States, from all those people that come from different countries, for example, yourself and me, if we meet here, we definitely can have something in exchange. Like you can learn more things about China from me, and I can learn from your home country or backgrounds. So I think that's the most important thing. That's also something cannot be learned and taught, except you have to experience it. And then that's what I learned the most. And also when I decided to do the first exchange, my parents were actually hesitated because they thought coming to the US is already like study abroad for me. But I promised to them, because they are Chinese rigorous academic, they really pay attention to academic rigorousness. So I promised to them that I will keep up with my GPA and I'll be graduating on time. So they allowed. And after I came back from the first study abroad experience, they saw how much chance that I had, and how much more new ideas and new perspective that I can bring up to the family dinner table. So after that, they started to say that if I keep my promise, I can go to more places. And especially you pay the same tuition for attending to different programs. I think it's definitely worth trying, and make myself more international citizen, like a global citizen today than any other Chinese student who only came to the United States, because I can adapt to like European cultures, or like Southeast Asian cultures, or even just have their language when I talk to them.
Thank you so much for that question. I do have like for that answer. Actually, I do have other questions, but I don't know if other people also have questions. I'm just gonna wait. Um,
Thank you,
and
You
Shabbat.
can add my LinkedIn. You can find my name on LinkedIn, then we can talk.
oh yes, I'm gonna do that right away.
Hope you don't
So
mind. I shared the linking with UW
Not a problem.
students.
No, not at all.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear you all are using LinkedIn. Anyway.
That's good.
I want to be mindful of the time, Crysti, because I know you have to go.
I have to go, but thank you so much for inviting me to this.
So
Thank you.
thank you all. So can we give her a hand, whether it be the old school or the emojis? Thank you so much, Crysti. This has been wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Crysti.
Okay. So let's just chat
Oh.
afterwards individually. All right, bye.